She told him she was pregnant. And the next morning, he handed her divorce papers. That was how it began. Or maybe that was how it ended. Riley stood in the kitchen, holding a cup of warm chamomile tea. The steam fogged her glasses, but nothing could blur the image of Owen's cold face from the night before. They had been married for 5 years, 5 winters in North Dakota. 5 years of shared dreams, laughter, and lately, silence. It wasn't always like this. Once, Owen used to touch her hand like it was made of glass. He used to kiss her on the forehead when he thought she was asleep. But in the last few months, Riley felt something shift. No fights, no yelling, just distance. A quiet kind of leaving. And still, when she saw those 2 faint pink lines on the pregnancy test, her first thought was hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, this would bring them closer again. So she made his favorite dinner, wore that deep green sweater he loved, waited until after dessert to whisper the words, "I'm pregnant." For a moment, Owen just stared at her. He didn't smile, didn't speak, didn't even blink. Then, slowly, he stood up from the table, walked to the sink, and began washing his plate, like nothing had happened. Riley sat there, frozen, the silence between them louder than any scream. And now, less than 12 hours later, he was standing in the doorway of their bedroom, holding a thick envelope. "I'm filing for divorce." Just like that. No explanation, no tears, not even anger, only detachment, as if she was a stranger. Her knees gave out. The world tilted. She clutched her stomach, barely showing, but already growing a life inside. A life he didn't want. How do you process something like that? How do you go from planning a nursery to planning how to survive alone? Riley tried to speak, but no words came. Only one question echoed inside her. Why? Why now? Why like this? She didn't get an answer. Owen left that night, left the keys on the table, left the wedding ring on the bathroom counter. He took his coat, his suitcase, and all the promises they once made. Outside, the North Dakota wind howled, but inside, the silence was heavier. Riley sat on the floor, surrounded by baby books she'd just ordered online. On the fridge, the ultrasound photo was still pinned with a little heart-shaped magnet. She touched it softly. "This is all you have now," she whispered. "A baby. And a broken heart. But what do you do when the person you trusted the most becomes the one who breaks you? North Dakota winters aren't just cold. They're isolating. The kind of cold that seeps into your bones and stays there. Riley lived in a modest home just outside of Bismarck. The house had white siding and blue shutters. Nothing fancy, but it had been theirs. She remembered the day they moved in. Owen carried her over the threshold, laughing, promising they'd fill the house with music and memories. Now, it was silent. Riley's days blurred together. Mornings spent staring out the window. Afternoons curled up on the couch with a blanket pulled over her legs, as if hiding could make the pain smaller. She still hadn't told anyone, not even her sister Haley. Not yet. It felt too raw, too humiliating. How do you explain that your husband left the day after you told him you were pregnant? She thought about Owen constantly. She wondered what he was doing, where he was sleeping, whether he thought about the baby, whether he ever loved her at all. It made her question everything. Every kiss, every quiet night spent planning a future that would never come. And yet, life inside her was growing. The nausea was relentless. Her emotions, out of control. Some nights she cried for hours, wrapped in Owen's old flannel shirt. Other nights, she felt nothing at all. She forced herself to go to work. She was a part-time art teacher at a local middle school. The kids were loud and messy, but sometimes their laughter made the ache a little lighter. Only one person noticed the sadness in her eyes, Mr. Caldwell, the janitor. He was in his 60s, quiet but observant. One afternoon, he stopped her in the hallway. "You okay, Riley?" She smiled too fast. "Yeah, just tired." He nodded slowly, not convinced, but he didn't press. That small kindness meant more than he'd ever know. That week, she finally called Haley. Her sister listened quietly. There were no gasps, no interruptions. And when Riley finally broke down, Haley simply whispered, "I'm coming. I don't care what it costs. I'm not letting you go through." This alone. For the first time in days, Riley felt something close to relief. But no amount of comfort could erase the gaping hole Owen left behind. Riley's second ultrasound was scheduled for a Thursday morning. She almost canceled it. Walking into that clinic alone felt like rubbing salt in the wound. But she went. Because the baby deserved that. Because she deserved that. The nurse smiled gently. "You want to hear the heartbeat today?" Riley nodded, barely able to breathe. And then, there it was. So tiny. So alive. Her throat tightened. Tears spilled down her cheeks before she could stop them. In that moment, she wasn't just abandoned. She wasn't just broken. She was a mother, but outside the clinic, someone was waiting. Owen. She froze when she saw him, leaning against his car like nothing had happened. He looked thinner, tired, but not regretful. She didn't speak, just walked past him. "Riley," he called out. "Wait." She turned, slowly, her eyes sharp and wounded. "I just wanted to know how the baby was." Riley blinked, stunned by the nerve of him. "You left me," she said softly, "and now you want to ask about the baby." He didn't answer, didn't move. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You said you loved me." "I did," he said. "I do. But I can't be a father. I thought I could. I really tried." His voice cracked, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. Riley stepped back. "Then stay gone, Owen. You made your choice." She drove home shaking. Tears blurred the road. She didn't stop until she was back in the safety of her driveway. That night, she wrote in her journal, "He came back just to remind me that he left." The next few weeks were harder. She started showing. Strangers began asking, "When are you due?" And every time, she forced a smile and said, "Soon." But inside, she was unraveling. She had dreams, dark ones, where Owen came back, only to disappear again. She started attending a support group for single mothers. That's where she met Carla, strong, opinionated, and full of fire. "You don't need him," Carla said one evening after Riley broke down in the church basement. "You're going to raise that baby like the badass you are." It was the first time Riley laughed in weeks. Slowly, very slowly, a new kind of strength began to bloom inside her. But just as she began to find her footing, a letter arrived. From Owen. Inside was a short note and a check, a large one, enough to cover medical expenses, enough to make it seem like he still cared. From a distance. She held the check in her hand for a long time, and then she ripped it in half. Some things money can't fix. Spring came late that year. North Dakota was still wrapped in a blanket of snow by April. But inside Riley's heart, something had started to thaw. She painted again. Not for her students, but for herself. Large canvases filled with soft pastels and sharp reds, as if her emotions were spilling directly onto the fabric. Haley stayed for 2 weeks after the ultrasound. She stocked the fridge, folded laundry, even assembled the baby crib. She never once mentioned Owen's name. She didn't have to. Riley felt it anyway, in the silence between them. They were walking in the park one evening when Haley finally spoke up. "Do you think he'll come back?" Riley didn't answer right away. "I don't want him to." And she meant it. But that didn't stop the dreams, didn't stop the ache. Every now and then, Owen would text, "Hope you're feeling okay. Do you need anything? Can I come to the next appointment?" But he never said what she needed most to hear. He never said, "I'm sorry." He never said, "I made a mistake." So she ignored the texts, let the silence grow between them like a wall. One day at school, a student named Ellie stayed after class. She was 12, quiet, always sketching something in her notebook. That afternoon, she walked up and handed Riley a folded piece of paper. It was a drawing, a woman standing alone, holding a baby in her arms. Above her the words, "Strong doesn't mean unbreakable. It means you broke and still kept going." Riley nearly cried right there in the art room. It was the kind of truth only a child could put into words. She pinned the drawing above her desk, and from that day on, she carried herself a little taller. But still, the loneliness was heavy. Nights were the worst. When the baby kicked, and Owen wasn't there to feel it. When Riley reached across the bed and found nothing but sheets, sometimes she spoke to the baby out loud. "I hope you never feel what I'm feeling right now. I hope you grow up braver than me. I hope I'm enough." Her voice would shake, but she kept speaking, because silence had already taken too much. And with each word, she reclaimed a little more of herself. She didn't need closure. She needed courage. It was a Sunday afternoon in early May when Riley's water broke. She was folding baby clothes, humming softly, when she felt the sudden rush. Her heart raced, her hands trembled. She was alone, but not afraid. She grabbed her hospital bag, double-checked the list, and called Haley, who promised to meet her there. The drive was short. The pain, manageable at first. But it wasn't long before the contractions came hard and fast. At the hospital, everything moved quickly. Monitors beeped. Nurses rushed in and out. The doctor reassured her, told her to breathe, to push, to hold on just a little longer. And then, a cry. Sharp, beautiful, alive. A little girl. Riley named her Emery. Tears streamed down her face as the nurse laid the baby on her chest. In that moment, every crack inside her heart seemed to glow with light. She whispered into her daughter's ear, "You saved me." But just as she settled into the warmth of new motherhood, a knock came at the hospital room door. It was Owen, holding flowers, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Riley's body tensed. Her smile vanished. "I heard," he said softly. I had to come." She stared at him, not with love, not with anger, but with a strength he had never seen in her before. "She doesn't need flowers," Riley said. "She needs a father who doesn't run." He looked down, ashamed. "I know I don't deserve to be here. I just wanted to see her." A long pause. Then she handed Emery to Haley, who stood nearby. "If you really want to see her," Riley said, voice low and steady, "then come back when you're ready to stay. Otherwise, walk away now. For good." Owen didn't answer. He looked at the baby, then at Riley, and then he turned and left. No words, no goodbye, only footsteps fading down the hallway. Riley didn't cry this time. She looked at her daughter, held her close, and whispered, "Your father may have left, but I never will." The first weeks at home were a blur. Emery's cries filled the house at all hours. Riley barely slept, living in a rhythm of feeding, rocking, changing, and whispering lullabies in the dark. It was exhausting, but it was hers. Every chaotic moment was hers. Friends dropped off meals. Her mother called more often now, though never said the right things. Haley visited every weekend she could, but she had a life back in Minneapolis. Eventually, even she had to return to it. And Riley stayed, alone with the baby, alone with the house full of quiet reminders of what could have been. The rocking chair Owen assembled still creaked in the corner of the nursery. The photos of their wedding were long taken down. But sometimes she caught herself glancing at that empty space on the wall, like her eyes hadn't yet unlearned the memory. 2 months after Emery's birth, Owen called. He didn't ask to talk to Riley, just said, "Can I see her?" Riley didn't say yes right away, but eventually she agreed, under one condition. He would come to visit Emery, not her. They met at a quiet park. Owen brought a stuffed fox, unsure of what babies liked. Riley handed Emery over without a word. She watched him hold her awkwardly, unsure where to place his hands, how to look into eyes that mirrored his own. "I don't know how to do this," he whispered. Riley's voice was calm. "You don't get to say that anymore. You left. Learn now." And from then on, Owen visited every other Sunday. He never stayed long, never tried to rekindle anything. He would bring small toys, ask how Emery was sleeping, how she was eating, whether she liked music, but he never asked about Riley, and she never offered anything. Their conversations were short, sometimes strained, sometimes civil, but never warm. He had moved to another neighborhood in Bismarck, an apartment above a bookstore. He lived alone. Riley heard from someone at school that he'd stopped dating, that he'd pulled away from his friends. But she didn't ask. She didn't want details. His absence had taught her one thing. She couldn't afford to care anymore. Life moved forward. Slow, but forward. Riley returned to teaching. Her students welcomed her back with handmade cards and messy hugs. She taught art during the day and gave Emery the world at night. Every bottle, every bedtime story, every scraped knee and quiet question. But there were moments, hard, uns, where the silence in her heart felt unbearable. The first time Emery said "Dada," it wasn't to Owen. It was to a cartoon on the TV, and Riley had to leave the room and cry in the hallway, because even when she gave everything, the ache of what she couldn't give still cut deep. But she didn't fall apart. She got up. She kept going. Because love wasn't a shared bed or a happy ending. It was choosing someone, every day, even when you had to do it alone. And Riley chose Emery, again and again, even when it hurt, even when it was unfair, even when no one chose her back. Years passed. The seasons in North Dakota shifted again and again. Winters came and went. The little girl in the crib grew taller, louder, and more curious by the day. Emery had her mother's eyes, but her father's smile, the one Riley had tried to forget. And every time she saw it, it brought a strange ache. Not anger, not longing, just a quiet sadness, like a melody half remembered. By the time Emery turned 5, she had questions. Why doesn't Daddy live with us? Did he not like our house? Did he stop loving you? Riley always answered honestly, simply, without bitterness. Daddy and I were better apart. but we both love you more than anything in this world." That was the truth, and it was enough. Owen stayed in Emery's life, consistent but distant. He never remarried, never moved away, never brought anyone else around her. Sometimes Riley wondered if he regretted it all. She never asked. He never said. One spring, Riley ran into him at the grocery store. Emery wasn't with her. They stood near the produce aisle, the air between them full of everything unsaid. "You look tired," he said. "I am," she replied, turning away. "Single. Mothers don't sleep much." Owen nodded. "I see her in the weekends. I know it's not enough." "It never was," she said quietly, and walked away. That was the last real conversation they ever had. From then on, he stayed silent during pickups and drop-offs. Riley was grateful. Her life wasn't perfect. Far from it. There were no new romances, no second chances. Just art. Just Emery. Just strength. She watched her daughter grow into a fierce, brilliant young woman, and though the ache never truly left, it softened, became part of the landscape. Like wind through prairie grass, always present, but no longer sharp. She never forgot what it felt like to be left, to beg for love that didn't return, to carry life in her body while feeling like she was dying inside. But she also never forgot the moment she heard Emery cry for the first time, or the first smile, the first time she called her mama. Those memories outweighed the pain. They always would. Because love doesn't always get tied with a bow. Sometimes it stays messy, broken, and unfinished. But still, it shows up. Every morning, every night. In every sacrifice no one ever sees. Riley's heart didn't heal completely, but it made room for something stronger than healing. It made room for love without conditions. Love without expectations. Love that never leaves. Years later, Riley sat alone on the porch, watching Emery play in the yard. The sun was low, the wind soft, and the world for a brief moment was quiet. Emery was 13 now, bright, funny, kind. She had no idea how much her mother had given up to raise her. No idea how many nights Riley cried in silence. How many dreams she buried. How many times she whispered, "You are worth everything." Owen still visited. Still quiet. Still alone. He watched his daughter grow up. From the sidelines. Never close. Never far. Just there. Sometimes Riley wondered if he ever felt the full weight of what he lost. If he lay awake at night thinking about the day he walked away from love. But she didn't wish him pain. Not anymore. She just wished he'd learned something, even if it came too late. Riley would never love again, not because she couldn't, but because she already did. Fully, completely, and forever. Her heart had broken, but in its place, it built a home for a little girl who never once had to question if she was enough. And as the wind swept through the yard, and her daughter's laughter rang like music, Riley smiled. She had lost a marriage, she had lost a future, but she had gained something unshakable. A love that never left, and a strength that never broke. And if this story moved you or even made you think, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone. And this story is a work of fiction. All characters, names, and situations are entirely made up and are not based on real individuals. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, is purely coincidental.